A minority government brings, of course, a new reality for Justin Trudeau, one with new challenges in a more divided country. So just how will he govern? At Issue is back for a special Tuesday edition after a marathon election special. We should have just spent the whole night together, you guys. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj, they are all still in Toronto tonight, and I'm here back in Ottawa. Thanks again for being here again tonight. So let's start with how Justin Trudeau is going to approach this, and whether what we've seen of him in the past as Prime Minister gives us any sort of indications about how he would approach a minority government this time. Andrew, I'll start with you.
I don't think we've seen a great deal. I mean, he hasn't had this situation in the past. I don't think on his track record that conciliation and mediation is necessarily his strong point. And he's in a very different world than when he could simply issue edicts and his obedient parliamentary majority would pass it. So he's got to deal with not only a parliament unlike anything he's seen before, but partly because he's so weakened, a much stronger opposition in the provinces as well. People smell blood in the traditional political way, and you can see his opponents circling around. This is going to test all of his political skills.
Okay, well, I'll get to the provinces in particular because they were all certainly sharpening their knives today. Althea, what do you think about what we know of Justin Trudeau and how that might indicate how he's going to move forward on this?
I think there's a part of him that likes to be Captain Canada, and we saw that in the last bit of the election with him going to Calgary, for example, not a place that Liberals really thought realistically they were going to win seats, but they wanted to send a message. So I think that he is going to, and I say this perhaps like hopefully, try to bring the country together because we didn't see that in the speech last night. I don't think that he needs to form a coalition or a type of fixed agreement with any of the parties in the House of Commons. His minority is actually pretty strong. And case by case, you can see where the NDP, the Greens, even the Bloc would have an interest in supporting his agenda. I would have said even the Conservatives, except for Mr. Scheer's speech earlier today, it doesn't seem like Mr. Scheer wants to work with Justin Trudeau at all. So I would be surprised that the Conservatives actually support some of the legislation where, frankly, there's kind of an overlap in their platforms. You know, like on maternity benefits, for example, you could see a scenario where perhaps the Conservatives could come on side, but I don't see that at the moment.
So Chantal, after a little bit of sleep, have you had any more thoughts on how Justin Trudeau might approach all of this?
Well, I think he was lucky that the NDP got enough seats that the two of them together actually work out to a majority, which basically means that he doesn't have to wake up every morning wondering what the Bloc Québécois is thinking about everything. And that makes his life a bit easier. In the past, caucus management, when you have a minority government, has tended to become a bit easier because most members do not want to go in an election. I can name one premier, Bill Davis, who had the minority government, 2 in a row actually, who actually enjoyed it more because it kept the more extreme elements of his caucus in line than the majority rule, which he found a bit boring. So I think there's plenty of grounds in this parliament for Justin Trudeau, if he does what he needs to do, to make it work and to make it work for a long time. The NDP, the Green Party, the Bloc, none of them is keen to go back in an election and lose that position of influence. They're all broke. And there is, frankly, no, unless you manufacture it, no real reason for that to happen. The Conservatives, yes, are under Andrew Scheer are saying whatever it is that they're saying, but at the end of the day, no minority government depends on the official opposition to survive.
Can I just add something? Yeah. I thought it was really interesting that Yves-François Blanchet, the Bloc leader today, actually talked about how a mandate is 4 years, and he personally doesn't see why the minority government should not last 4 years. And we've been talking about it like, 2 years, because that's usually what it is. But it was interesting that he was like, nope, your mandate should be 4 years and you should stay there for 4 years.
Andrew, yeah.
Well, and as a senior Liberal told, I think it was Reuters today, there's a lot of MPs who need 2 more years to get their 6-year pension eligibility.
Well, not a small thing, not a small thing.
What you will also see, of course, is no one wants to be seen, especially at this juncture, as being eager for another election. So everyone will be professing their willingness to work together. And it's only because of the intransigence of the other party that I'm forced to do this, whatever this measure is.
Although the Conservative leader did sound a little chomping at the bit today, and I don't think that's a real thing, but he did suggest today that they would be ready to take him down, that this was the first step to forming government. I don't know if that's just rhetoric or if there's something more there to understand.
Let's understand that Andrew Scheer is now fighting a battle on two fronts. Yeah. Yes, he is the official opposition in a minority parliament, but he is also a leader who has not delivered the kind of results that a lot of members had hoped for. And it is in his best interest to keep the party thinking, and I don't think that will work, but to keep the party thinking that an election could be just around the corner, so this is no time to go after the leader. I'm not convinced that that's going to do the trick.
That's a really good point. I mean, just even in the words that he said in his press conference today, we've had the largest vote before. People have supported, they voted for me, they voted for my platform. Like the me and the my were really interesting. Usually people talk about our party and our platform. And that to me was just directed at a leadership review, which according to the Conservative Party's rules has to happen because they lost the election. And so to me, that was about fending off leadership challengers.
There was something really smart that Melissa Lantsman, a former Conservative staffer, said on Power and Politics earlier today. I'll put this to you, Andrew. And that was, as much as this is a struggle now for Justin Trudeau in parts of the country, she also pointed out that the other danger here is for Andrew Scheer to retreat into the Western Canada base and end up with nothing more. How dangerous and how risky is that for Mr. Scheer?
Well, this is the permanent Conservative dilemma that has been for the last several years, which is they own the West. They've owned the West since the 1950s. But they either can't or won't find it within themselves to reach out beyond that, and particularly to reach urban voters in central Canada. I think, it's fine to be racking up 80% majorities in Alberta, but if they could win a few 40% pluralities in Ontario, they'd be further ahead. So this isn't just regional, it's also cultural. It's, higher educated versus less educated Canadians. It's men versus women. Conservatives have not addressed this of trying to broaden their base out so they can get above that rock solid 32, 33% and actually aspire to the 40%, which is when you start winning majorities.
Yeah, go ahead, Chantal.
And I think it's not been 24 hours, but what we saw is the kind of alliance of Conservative premiers that kind of rallied behind Andrew Scheer in the lead up to the election is already showing deep cracks, with the Premier of New Brunswick saying, I'm going to figure out my own carbon tax. Where Ontario goes from here is very much a question mark. I don't think that Doug Ford feels that he was treated properly by Andrew Scheer and that Andrew Scheer has the results to show for that strategy. And frankly, Ontario does not really have a dog in the battle for pipelines. So this kind of front may well start to fall apart, leaving Saskatchewan and Alberta on their own on it.
Yeah. Well, and also I would just say that the Manitoba Premier today, Brian Pallister, actually said, I'm willing to make sure that we don't get some sort of Western alienation, and he's certainly not a pal of the Liberal government. Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, Corey Teneke, the Conservative operative, was on TV with us last night saying that it was very essential for the Conservatives to hold on to their beachhead in Quebec, and that's true. But if you can only win a third of the seats in Ontario, you're just never going to form a government. And all those seats in the 905 that were there to be had, if the Conservatives, if they can't win that, then they're not even in the game.
Althea, on the premiers and how they are positioning themselves, because of course the most forceful language is coming from Saskatchewan and Alberta, because at this point they have nothing to lose. There are no red seats there. Not that it was a bastion of the Liberal Party anyway.
But you have to split it between what's rhetoric and what's actually getting done. And what you heard from the Alberta Premier, for example, Jason Kenney today, his tangible asks are things that the Prime Minister has already said yes to. I mean, he's purchased the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the Liberal government wants to build it. So they're singing from the same songbook on that. When it comes to disagreements about the carbon plan, I mean, you could say that those things could probably be worked out if your main ask is a pipeline and the person you're asking for it has already said yes, then it does seem like you could be partners if you wanted to be partners.
Okay, so tomorrow we will hear from Justin Trudeau. Today he was just out shaking hands, but tomorrow he's going to get some questions from the media. I'm not going to ask what you would ask him, but what does he need to say to Canadians that he didn't say last night? Because everyone sort of agrees that no one's speech did what it needed to do. Chantal.
He has to show some sense that this was not a big win, and that the regions that have felt left behind raised serious unity concerns. So rather than a triumph, here are my lines kind of press conference, it would be nice, and voters have been asking for that, if there is a real Justin Trudeau out there, for him to come out tomorrow.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that was definitely missing from last night's speech was some sense of humility. This is the smallest share of the popular vote for any winning party in the history of the country, 33%. So he's got some bridge building to do, not just in Parliament, where he's got to figure out how to work with the NDP in particular, whether it's an agreement or just working on legislation by legislation. But he's also got to build out in the country. He's got to restore his credibility and cachet with the country at large. It's one thing to have seats, and that's important, but you've also got to have a sense that the country is behind you, that you've got the wind at your back. In the early part of his first term, when he was riding high in popularity, that's when he had his best successes with the premiers in particular. And right now, he's not something they're particularly afraid of.
Althea.
As a humility, of course. I mean, the speech last night was like a speech he would have given if he'd won a majority. And that is something I think he needs to recognize, that a lot of people did not vote for him. But also I think he needs to address the fact that nobody in Saskatchewan and nobody in Alberta voted for him. And what is he going to do about that? National unity with Quebec, but also with Western Canada.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming back again tonight. And don't worry, I'm going to make them come back again on Thursday because it's a busy week and there's lots to talk about. So I'll see you all then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast edition, of course. Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/The National. The election may be over, but Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud and I still have more episodes of Party Lines coming your way on Thursday. We'll break down what happened. You don't want to miss that either.